Let's make some realistic Foley using Walker2 and Tiny Pants. This is not going to be an in-depth tutorial on the Dolby Atmos render or Pro Tools, or it's not really going to get too far into Walker2. There are a lot of settings to cover in Walker2, and there's some other demos out there. The goal of this is to show how to create realistic sounding Foley. I would say cinematic sounding Foley for podcasts or animations, whatever your project is. There's going to be two parts to this demo. One is going to be laying in the MIDI track for the footsteps, which will also become the MIDI track for pants sounds and shirt sounds. And then we're going to practically record some cloth Foley using some Tiny Pants, as well as using some general garments to kind of create some more fluid cloth sounds. Ugh. So it sounds like someone kind of just like stomping in place. And so if you're opening this up for the first time and you're hearing that, don't panic. There are ways to make this sound more realistic. And so if you kind of look through the settings, you're going to see a lot of stuff here. So you're going to see some different microphone options. You're going to see, is this a human? Is it an animal? Is it some kind of fire being? There's a bunch of options here. You're also going to see some kind of secondary kind of accessory sounds you can put in there, as well as some cloth sounds and some kind of surface sounds, so concrete, tiles. I like to kind of leave these alone. Over here, the things I'll kind of look at the first is make sure that distance and reverb are turned all the way down. And for the sake of doing this out of the gate, I kind of like to turn the casual outfit off because I kind of like to compartmentalize how I'm thinking about this. So I'm playing these using my MIDI keyboard that's just kind of hanging out here off to the left. Let's look at how to get started making the sound more realistic. Velocity, let's just kind of play some footsteps and I'm going to roll this dial and you'll see what it sounds like. So as you increase the velocity, the footsteps actually get softer, which is backwards to how you would think it is. And in my mind, in my personal experience, starting for around 95 and playing with the last 5% is where you get the most realism. And with lift, it doesn't do a lot for me. I kind of leave it at -25. I don't want a lot of it. I want some punch and enough things for the reverb to react to, so it sounds like it's put into a space. If like I'm trying to imagine like an extreme close-up of a shoe, I might turn some of these details back up, but I don't really need them in general. So going back over here to this section under the main kind of effect settings, I'm going to go into attack, and same thing. As I turn up the attack, it actually gets softer. So again, I want something for the reverb to react to. I like to leave this somewhere between 5 and 10 and kind of put the decay somewhere around 1.5 or so. And I can kind of change the surface depending on what you're going for and the shoe type. So you can kind of see how things are affected. Turn the pitch down a little bit to kind of denote the size of your character. And there you have it. It already sounds a lot more realistic than it did right out of the gate. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to another preset, which just leverages very similar settings to what I have set right here. Velocity, lift, attack, and decay. I'm going to turn off the cotton shirt. So I'm just getting the footfalls. Cool. So now we're technically ready to lay down some audio into the MIDI track. So let's just take a look at how this is set up real quick. So this project file, like I said, this is a Dolby Atmos template I have for being able to create quick things In this case, building this little Foley soundscape. I'm not going to go into depth in this, I will provide it, but just know that there's a section for all the kind of master outputs here. I usually use this for backgrounds. I'll call this renderer out. And so this is what's kicking the sound out to the renderer. So what you would see here. And there's nothing really to show right now, so we don't need this window. And just for the sake of the demonstration, I have a cinematic rooms preset on an aux track, which is patched into this Foley aux. Below that I have the instrument track, which is what we're going to use to record all of our MIDI from Walker. And below that I've made 3 stereo tracks because Walker only works in stereo. One I have labeled footsteps. I'll just move that up. One I have labeled pants, and one I have labeled shirt. And there's some plugs in here I'll describe later. So what's going to happen is I'm going to record the MIDI and drag it down into these tracks. And you'll see that process in just a second. Down here towards the bottom on these recorded pants and recorded shirt, these are the files we're going to put our tiny pants recordings and kind of our close wad recordings. And we're going to do that in just a minute. Okay, so now that we are ready, I'll pull these over here so you can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to, instrument 1 is record enabled. And so what I'm going to kind of imagine is doing this scene where someone kind of walks into the room, mills around a bit, and then walks to the other end of the room. Okay, and here we go. Cool, so that should work for the sake of demonstration. So one thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to actually go into the velocity settings of this and kind of make some really quick kind of cleanups. So that one a little extra, right? So we'll turn that down. So I want a little variance, but not too much difference between these. There we go. Looking at the settings again, we are good to go. I'm going to reduce the lift even more to 50%, so I'm not hearing so much of it. Or 50 dB, minus 50 dB. That's already sounding pretty okay, right? Just playing with the velocity of things and having the settings set the way that we have them, we're already getting more realism than we were out of the box. So let me just change this to clips. And now I'm going to save this because this is where Pro Tools likes to crash. So I'm going to just click on that clip and drag it down into the footsteps track, and it's going to make a waveform. Neat. So instrument track is still soloed. I'm going to go back into the plugin now. I'm going to turn off the boots, and I'm going to turn on cotton thick. So I'm going to turn the attack up further on that and the K because if this is a shirt, and you can look through here, you have a lot of settings. I prefer cotton thick to casual outfit. It just has a little more character. A shirt sound, if you kind of look at the gait of someone walking, it's a kind of a more of a sustained sound because we're constantly in motion. And so I'll just turn the attack and decay up to soften them and lengthen them. And once I kind of have them sounding okay, I'm going to go and drag this down to shirt. And I'm going to go back into the MIDI plugin. And let's just kind of go to Jeans Thick. Take a listen. For these, I'll turn the attack down because it's more of a momentary swish. Okay, so now we have 3 audio tracks laid down. If I mute the instrument track now and play these back, and all of these tracks, all the audio tracks are routed to this Foley aux, which is basically smashing them down into one mono track that can then be used as an object in 3D space and Dolby Atmos. And let's take a listen to what we made. And I'm going to disable the reverb And so we can just hear them dry. Okay, so here's where we kind of get into phase one of the adding that realism element to these. So if you think about someone walking and you kind of imagine a walk cycle in your head, or you just look at someone walking, or if you're really in doubt, just get up and walk around the room. You're going to notice that you have 2 points of contact for cloth on your pants. So kind of one at the thigh level and one again at the ankle. So it kind of depending on the your physique and what you're wearing, you might have multiple friction contact points where you're walking. You might have none. For the sake of experimentation, we just have the one friction point. I'm going to mute the shirt for now so we can talk about that in a minute. So just like in the plugin, these are playing at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the swish just before the footfall. We're going to say these are the ankles. So that contact's going to happen right before the footfall. And if you think about the shirt, kind of to maintain your balance as you walk, usually the arms kind of go at a exact kind of like scissor motion to the legs. So that way we don't fall over, physics and stuff. So if you kind of look at the waveform for the arms and the legs, kind of a logical offset would to have that swish basically in the middle. Cool. And if you have like some more specific, kind of like your character is stopping and standing still and continuing to handle something or move, you can just continue to record your cloth sounds into your instrument track and bring them down and mix them in, whatever you want to do. So let's play these all together. And you can kind of tweak them just to your heart's content. And that's sounding pretty good to me. So you can play with the volume of these just to kind of make them more or less present, whatever you want to do. I have a few plugins that are kind of doing some extra work here. So if you look on the footsteps, I'm using a transient shaper just to kind of give them a little extra punch. And that transient shaper is Smack Attack. We'll get to this little one in a second. And then I'm also using an EQ. Let's take a look at that, see what that's doing. So this is pretty sloppy, but really quickly what I like to do is just go through and pull out any frequencies in the vocal band and also kind of roll off the low end because I don't really fully like the tone of the recorded footsteps in Walker. So this is just my attempt at kind of controlling the tone of it to something that I like a little bit more. This little point at 10K is kind of cheating height. If you were looking at a scene and you are imagining you were looking at it at eye level, you know, you're looking your characters in the eye. Shoes are on the ground, so you kind of want to imagine that you are lowering them kind of psychologically in the space so they're sticking, you know, so it doesn't sound like they're occurring at the same kind of height level as your, you know, your vocals or whatever else you have in the scene that might be more important. So I make this little notch at 10K and I'll kind of just repeat a section of footsteps and roll it up and down so you can see the effect. So that's kind of what that EQ is doing. And again, these are personal preferences, so you might find different results by kind of messing with it. So that's basically it for laying in the UV Walker sounds. Now it's time to record the practical cloth sounds. So I'm going to zoom in. So what I'm going to be doing is keeping an eye on my footsteps waveform. And this is kind of where I gave myself a little bit of a runway. And I'm just gonna put on my pants. And what I'm going to do, let me switch over to my dynamic microphone. Hello, hello, hello. So I like to use a dynamic for this because if you use a condenser, you're more likely to pick up a lot of environment sounds. If you're not in an optimized recording environment and you have kind of a noisy space, you might get into where you have to use a noise reduction plugin, and that can really kill the nuances of your Foley. So I recommend a dynamic like this or a microphone. We have to get like right on it before you start getting results. Okay, so I am just going to go into this recorded pants track, record, enable it, and you can see we are ready to go. And so what I'm going to try to do is watch my waveform for the footfalls and try to swish right before that happens. Okay, let's give it a shot. See how badly I mess this up. What I like about this is it kind of gives you an opportunity to humanize it a little more and add some imperfections and little shifts in weight and stuff like that without having to perform it. I mean, the benefit of doing it this way is that versus like putting an outfit on and recording it, is that to get all the nuance of that performance, you really need to have it mic'd in multiple points. So depending on how intimate and how detailed you want that performance to be, could prove to be a little problematic. This kind of allows you to be right on the money with the type of fabric and whatnot you want. And I kind of have like this little pile of pants. I like this white pair because it fits on my fingers, but it's so silly, but you can actually get like Ken doll pants and different materials, because this is kind of like a little more of like a softer synthetic. You can just kind of shop around. This is kind of more of like a twill sounding. So you can actually get pretty far with tiny pants. I was playing around earlier with like if you want to put on a jacket. There's things you can do here, and same principle if you just want to find a cloth sample and kind of handle it, swish it between your fingers. It's the same thing. I really just get a kick out of this. Anyway, so there you have it. There's tiny pants, and we are done with our tiny pants, believe it or not. Now we are moving on to our shirt wad. And I just realized I had the reverb on that recorded pants, so that's why it probably sounded a little funky. And you're probably seeing a little bit of delay because now I'm speaking to you through Pro Tools. So I'm just going to take my clothes here. So these are just things I've pulled from my closet. I have a linen shirt, a wool jacket, and this silk shirt. So same idea. I'm going to be watching my waveform and kind of moving the clothes to emulate kind of the movements of the upper body. Cool, so we have that. Okay, so now that we have that, I am actually done with this guy. I'm going to pull it out of here just to get it out of the way. And so I have all my bass sounds that I need to kind of choose what works best for this scenario. Let's take a listen again at our footsteps with our recorded pants and shirt together. And I'm going to bring the gain up a little bit on the shirt. Okay, not too shabby. So we have some options. I'm going to save that. The other thing you can do is, let me go and pull my EQ down here. And there are, if you find that the tiny pants are too tiny, you can actually lower the pitch on the tiny pants. And I'm doing that just using in this case, Pro Tools built-in pitch plugin. And that kind of makes them just makes them a little bigger. There's our recorded Foley, and here's our Walker Foley. Cool, so we have some cool options here. I am going to do a thing. Let's keep the Walker pants. And let's keep our recorded shirt and just see what that sounds like. That sounds pretty good. Let's do it the other way around. Let's try our recorded pants, our tiny pants, and our Walker shirt. Cool. So let's just kind of go with that. Like I said, all these tracks are routed to my Foley aux track. So let me just activate the reverb on this track so we can kind of take a look at what to do here. So like I said earlier, I have my reverb through cinematic rooms on this aux, and then I'm using an aux send to send audio to it. And so in general, I kind of like to keep, I don't like to go over 20, but since this is, for the sake of this demonstration, I'll crank up the reverb to about 20, so that way we can really hear what it's doing. If you just slap the reverb on here as a send, there's two kind of listening methods, pre-fader and post-fader. So basically, if the source is called your dry signal, so your reverb is without any dry source is called your wet signal. So what you want to control is really the ratio of the wet and dry signal. When you just put your reverb on a send like this, it kind of defaults to post fader, which means when I adjust the volume, and I'll just do an automation, as the volume of the dry signal goes down, so does the volume of the wet signal, which means your reverb is going to go down parallel to your source. So let's just take a listen. And in your brain, if I crank up the reverb so you can really hear it, as if it's in a bigger space, you can kind of see where there's a problem. Because in real life, when someone walks away in a reverberant space, you still hear the footsteps echoing around. So to fix that, right-click it on it and hit pre-fader, and then let's take a listen to what that sounds like. So what's happening is the dry signal is losing gain, but the wet signal is staying constant. So it's going to stay at whatever I set it to here, which is a little extreme. This is where you can really tell where reverb starts to sound funky if it's set too high. And why I don't in general like to set it higher than 20 dB. So there we have it. Let's reverse this. And so one of the things that I like to do personally is keep my gain no louder than about 6 or 7 dB. So let's reverse this motion so it's almost like this person is approaching. This kind of feeds into my overall philosophy with footsteps and Foley, which is that keeping it so they are not too loud helps with the realism. They're meant to be felt more than they are meant to be heard in a way, because you want to sell the presence of somebody. And if they're too loud, it's going to start to sound cartoony. So unless you're doing something that's really stylized, that might not be appropriate. If you're going for realism, you know, keeping these things to almost where they feel too quiet can be a boon. And I know I'm in the minority of people who like to kind of work subtly like that, especially in an audio-only format, so I totally get that. But to me, that just is kind of, that's what sells realism, and what makes people say that something sounds cinematic is because it's not overt. So you're going to notice something else. I'm going to deactivate this equalizer and show you what it's doing. Let's take a listen. Suddenly they're heavier and the realism's kind of compromised. So what this equalizer is doing is it is actually adding a proximity effect by controlling, and this is something that I have automated. Let's take a look at that. And this is something that's completely optional. You don't have to do this. This is just kind of some special sauce. This is just controlling just further perception of how close or far this person is without, you know, just turning the volume up and down. There he goes. And let's do the same thing with our volume. So we're controlling how near or far this person sounds to us just by the EQ and the mixture of reverb and dry signal. And now the last thing I'm going to do is go into Dolby Atmos and add some of the panning that kind of will further sell this. And this is where it gets a little dicey, right? So get everything where we can see it. This little guy can be real temperamental. So, and kind of deleting your automations can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. But as I play this, you're going to start to see on the render the positioning. Let's go and we'll put a little dude in there. Okay, so I'm just going to set this to latch and get to where I can actually see the track. And starting from the left, he's going to kind of go from the left of the scene, mill around in the middle, kind of in front of the listener, and then disappear off to the right. Ready? So we're kind of paying off how we've set this up in Atmos to route all of the sounds into one Foley signal that can be tracked to one object in an Atmos scene, and how that also helps to add a layer of realism. Kind of can go back to how I had the setup earlier where I can actually duplicate this reverb down here. So I'm using the same reverb send just to kind of add a little more separation between the claw sounds and the footsteps. Okay, cool. So just for fun, let's take another listen with everything all considered with the recorded shirt and Walker pants. And I want some more gain from our recorded shirt. And there we have it. That's sounding pretty good to me. So, we have a couple options here. And so you've kind of seen how I've blended workflows between recorded and Walker generated sounds. All these things are worth some experimentation, regardless of your workflow, regardless of your DAW. You know, you don't need everything here to be able to do this. A lot of the principles copy over just with how you use the mixture of your reverb and dry signal in your scene to amplify the realism and how to kind of EQ. Hopefully this gives you some ideas. Hopefully this helps answer some questions and sets you off on a path to creating your own realistic Foley. So if you have questions or anything, throw them in the comments, or if there's anything else you would like to see like this, you know, also just leave me a note and I'll see what I can do. All right, thank you and good luck.